First, I want to thank Faye and Wanda and everybody for putting this on. It's great to be here. I'm very honored to be a part of this conversation, and I hope we can have a good dialogue. And thanks to Marjorie for her presentation. We overlap on a lot of things, and we have a lot of similar connections, and there's a really good dialogue to be had here. So I'm going to get going as the time is counting down. The topic that I want to talk to you about today and share some of this research with you is Black language and white public space. And as a little plug for the workshop, that's the title of the workshop right under there, is Hearing with Different Ears, what it means to be critically aware of language in your classroom. Okay. Today is November 7th, but it says the 6th. It's only important if you believe time is linear, right? It's not about that. It's not about that. Yeah. Okay, so I'll be introducing you to the high school that I've worked in for quite some time. It's Haven High. The concept of Black language and white public space. A dialogue with a well-meaning teacher. Okay, the study of style shifting. And this we'll get to more in the workshop on pedagogical approaches to working with students of marginalized language varieties. You see real talk, language in my life, and other approaches. And with the goal of language, education, and social change as the sort of larger, broader goal of my work. Okay, so Haven High and Sunnyside. So in this work, I examine the language and linguistic practices of students at Haven High, or in Marjorie's terms, their linguistic repertoire, so the full range of language and linguistic practices in an ethnically and racially diverse high school that I call multilingual and multilectal, meaning that there's a lot of languages and language varieties that students are aware of and that they use and that they understand and that they participate in. Let's see. So in 1999 and 2009, you can see how this community has changed and the school has changed from predominantly Black to predominantly Latino. Okay, and you can see the numbers almost switch in 10 years. So this is a community that is very much in the process of gentrification, and it comes along with not your traditional sense of gentrification per se. Of course, traditionally gentrification is always complicated, but you have a lot of ethnic diversity and economic development occurring simultaneously in ways that we don't often expect. So this is a community in transition. It's a majority, minority community, or city of color, as people talk about it in the literature. It's located in a working class suburb of approximately 33,000 that I call Sunnyside. It's in the Bay Area, California, Northern California. Right? So I'm working with this community for about 2 years of field work as a teacher, researcher, and an additional year and a half of insights gained beyond the teaching experience as I moved into the community and became a regular participant in Sunnyside's most infamous barbershop, The Right Price. This is important in order to give you a sense that this is an ethnographic study in which I went into the community and became a participant, had a regular role, was a teacher, was a researcher, and was a community participant, so sort of became relevant to the community. And for several years, been splitting my time between here and Sunnyside, now mostly in Sunnyside. So it's an ongoing project. Okay. Okay. See the time. Check this time. Okay. So Black language and white public space. Really quickly, I'm going to run through these couple of slides. People have talked about U.S. racial segregation as American apartheid in the research, and they've also talked about the lack of significant studies of Black-white intercultural communication. But the main concept I'm working with here is white public space as a significant set of contexts that are the most important sites of the practices of racializing hegemony in which whites are invisibly normal and in which racialized populations are visibly marginal and the object of monitoring ranging from individual judgment to official English legislation. Okay, so this is the concept of white public space that I'm working with. And just to give you a sense of what that might mean to students, to teachers, to people in general, is I have 2 quotes from teachers that I've worked with where they're actually in workshops and courses where discussions get very intense. As you've all seen over the last couple of weeks or a couple of months or even couple of years with the Obama campaign, there's been a lot of intensity of emotions around race and race dialogue, and the discourse has kind of opened up in ways that we don't really expect, and sometimes things come out, and sometimes things happen that we're not really used to talking about. And so in some of these courses, people break down and cry, actually, that the level of discussion is that intense. And so in these two cases, I've had two different students in different contexts be very emotional. And one student says, I didn't realize that I had a way of speaking, right? And this was a conversation about ways of speaking, and this was a female student, a white female student, and she was very moved and moved to tears, actually, because we were talking about all the language varieties. And sociolinguists are partially responsible for this, in that we often study these sort of marginalized language varieties. We're not ethnic communities, so we got Chicano English over here, we got Black English over there, we got Native American English over here, right? And then we have this thing that's standard English or whatever, and it's de-ethnicized. And so this white student reading all this and was understanding language and marginality in a new way, and was moved to tears about not realizing that she actually had a way of speaking herself. And this is just to point out right here. So I'll tell you how I'm making sense of this next. And the next quote is, I'm just so ashamed of my language. Sometimes I hate myself for talking like this, you know. And this was probably one of the most moving office hour sessions that I've had with an aspiring teacher who was also moved to tears in a one-on-one conversation, because to me, she was a young Latina, and she seemed actually to possess this broad linguistic repertoire, Marjorie, like very broad. And it was sort of, I didn't even realize or wasn't tipped off in any way that she was a learner of English. I always thought she was, she was very fluent in Spanish and in English and had a strong command, and it never came across as someone who would be insecure of their own ways of speaking. But in courses, in classes, in academic settings here at UCLA, actually, she felt ashamed of her language that I admired. I was admiring her linguistic flexibility, and she was actually feeling ashamed and hating herself for talking like the way that she talks. So these things are very moving, and these quotes are just to point out that these affect real people in very different ways. This notion of white public space and what it means to be monitored constantly for how you're speaking. So WME is called white mainstream English, and white mainstream ways of speaking become the invisible, or rather inaudible and unmarked norms of what becomes glossed as communicating in academic settings. So whenever we talk about, communicating in academic settings or academic language, et cetera, we're not acknowledging how race and identity are implicated in that in very strong and meaningful ways. So